Alrighty. Hello, everybody. We are here in week 11. Excuse me. Week 11, and just one more to go. So today I'm going to try to go through exactly what we're doing for this very last essay to make sure everything is perfectly clear. So here I am in Blackboard, going down to week 11. Okay, first thing to notice is that some people have been having trouble accessing articles that have the comments after the articles. So what I did was so the ones that say with comments on them are the articles that I basically copied a bunch of the comments, right? So here's an example. This is the 272 slaves were sold to save Georgetown. So the article comes first, and then if you keep scrolling, you'll see that I put a bunch of comments because this week is all about looking at these comments and trying to figure out what types of justice people are talking about in the comment world. Okay, so that's sort of the broad idea. And the next part of that is after doing that, you then are going to sort of develop an essay or develop a thesis statement from that. Right. So this idea is about looking at specific evidence and developing a thesis from evidence instead of trying to develop a thesis and then going to find evidence to support that. Right. So this is more connected to like a real world situation, meaning, nobody in real life thinks of a thesis statement and then goes and proves it or whatever. Instead, they read something, they see an article, they watch TV, one or the other. Oh, wait, hold on. Make sure. Okay, I don't think you guys could see this before. So anyway, I opened the PDF from Blackboard, and here's the article, right? So the article comes first, and you keep scrolling, and then you will hit a bunch of comments. Okay, so again, you're looking through the comments, you're reading through them, and you're trying to pull out different ideas about justice that people are talking about. And from that, you'll be able to create a thesis statement having to do with whatever your subject is and justice. All righty. We'll go back to all right, week 11. So that's what that is. So everything with comments, there should be at least one for each of the subjects. And you want to also cite, like use, make sure that you quote, if you're going to quote from them, which you probably should, you want to make sure that you just take the information that you can. Like you just need their username, whatever they call themselves, and the date. I'm going to go over these 4 steps to developing this essay in a moment. There's class notes, which are basically the elements of a paragraph, which we looked at in week 2. And then this idea about revising and editing, self-assessing your own work. This is the assignment sheet for 4, right? So it says analyze citizens or fans' comments about an issue related to justice. You can choose comments from Twitter, comment section of a news site, so on. So basically, I tried to, do this so that you had an article and you have comments about the article after it. So in the examples you find, do fans or citizens frequently rely on corrective, retributive, or distributive ideas of justice? Do you think that this idea of justice is good for the fans, the industry, the employees? So this is all about the NFL, right? So if you do a different subject, you want to do the same thing. What type of justice are they talking about when they're talking about reparations? Do you think this type of justice is good for the school, the students, and the descendants of slaves, right? So my suggestion is you stick to whatever your subject was for so far, okay? Because this is not, even though it says you can stick, it says you can pick a different subject if you want. My idea is, and I got rid of those links because the links that were there for music were totally old. I say stick with the subject. So here's the idea, explanation of essay 4. So this essay is meant to develop out of the concept of justice and your analysis of people's commentary. So instead of creating a thesis and then seeking support, you are going to analyze information and create a thesis out of what you find. You will draw a conclusion based on your analysis, and this will serve as a thesis. As you develop a conclusion that will serve as the thesis for the final essay, you will also want to think about locating evidence that will help support your conclusion. You will need to work with 2 pieces of evidence at the beginning of this week, right? Week 11. So we have discussion prompt A and discussion prompt B. And then also here at the bottom, if for those of you who have not found it yet, there are sort of extended definitions of these types of justice, right? Because I know we have like a tiny, explanation, but this is a little bit more extended from a good source and all that. So you can use that to help you with this. These could serve also as some of your evidence that you may want to discuss. So let's see here. Now I'm going to go over. All right, so I put this together just now, not now, but recently. So 4 steps to developing essay number 4. Okay, step 1 is locating and identifying evidence. So the first thing is you're going to analyze commentary, but you're also going to go ahead and try to find, if you can, other pieces of evidence that you can use, other sources, basically. And like I said, you could use, the 3 types of justices. That's one you could use. But anyway, for the first part, you're looking for comments at the end of one of the articles. Then you're trying to look below the surface to figure out how the writers are thinking about justice, even though they do not explain it clearly. So this is that concept of inference, right? So you are going to read it and you're trying to figure out what type of justice they're talking about, even though they don't actually say, I am talking about this type of corrective justice, right? So making the conceptual connection basically between evidence, this person's comments that they wrote, and this concept of justice is sort of like where that's the advancing in your thinking that's going on. So for example, you have, how would a writer analyze this comment by Neil as part of the paper, right? So football will always be a dangerous sport with long-term health risks. Why can't the league just admit this and be straight with the players and fans? Yes, you will likely suffer chronic injuries, brain damage, and lifelong symptoms from multiple concussions, but you also have a chance of being compensated well for playing a sport with these risks. I disagree with those who say the NFL is inhumane and should be banned from pro sports. I'm sure some players are aware of the risks and are okay with it. People have different levels of risk tolerance. That's why some end up as accountants and others are race car drivers. It is a brutal and dangerous sport. I wish the NFL would just admit it and put the emphasis on educating players, parents, coaches of the risk. Okay, so the idea is you're trying to look for synonyms or concepts that connect to justice, right? So, for example, this is sort of what they recommend. This is this idea. Synonyms, this idea here, right? Fairness, reasonableness, honesty, integrity. Straightness in this case, right, means not lying, like being truthful. Impartiality. So when Neil says, why can't the league be straight with players and fans? Yes, you will likely suffer, but you have a chance of being compensated, right? That whole comment has to do with justice, right? Being straight with players is like, why can't they be truthful about it? When we're talking about justice, we're also talking about harm to people and compensation for harm, right? So he's talking about, yes, you'll suffer, but you have a chance to be compensated, right? So he's using the word straight here as a synonym for fair or just or truthful. So that's the first thing. You've identified types of justice that people are talking about from some of the comments that you go over. So then the next step is you're using inference to analyze the evidence. Okay, so it's basically now you're trying to figure out, so what can you say about the type of justice that he's referring to based on what he's saying? So by suggesting that players take a risk and have the chance for compensation, and perhaps Neil is relying on the idea of distributive justice, right? So you're looking at the definitions of justice and trying to figure out sort of which one they happen to be talking about. By saying that players who take a risk might be rewarded, he's suggesting that the capitalist system will distribute benefits. Again, he's sticking sort of with this distributive justice idea. Right? So in analyzing it, you're looking for synonyms or associations to the concept you're working with, meaning you're looking for what the person is really saying in their comments. Then you're deciding, okay, here's the language they're using to talk about justice, and then here's the type of justice that they are referring to. So step 3 is, having done all that, you now need to develop ideas from this. Okay, so you're trying to now, it's almost not total free association, but it's kind of like that, right? So you have this idea that Neil has brought up about distributive justice in the NFL, and so you can start thinking about who benefits and who should bear the burdens. So it's all about deciding about harm and benefit, right? So in this case, so in the NFL, you could consider, here we go, you could consider who benefits from football. The fans have fun, NFL, like, so you want to start thinking about all the different people who are involved and what they get out of whatever your situation is, right? So the fans have fun, the NFL makes money, networks make money, advertisers make money, employees make money, players get fame and glory and do something they love. So are these benefits spread to the greatest number of people? What would have to change about the game or about society to make that possible? Like, this is, you could get into something about how, they're overpaid. Like, you could do something about how there's no justice there, in the sense that in society, right, we pay athletes way more money than like teachers, for example. And so why is that, and what would need to change to make pay more like justice or justified, right? Because most people will be like, oh yeah, an elementary school teacher is a super important person, or a nurse is a super important person. And if we were going to be like, all right, pay needs to show how important they are, right? And instead we have, Tom Brady making the most money of anybody ever. And he's playing NFL football, right? So you could get into that subject, and that's something that you could build an essay on. So that's the idea. You could try to apply or think about other types of justice and apply those to the situation, right? And you may find comments from people, talking about different forms of justice, so you can use them also, just to be like, okay. So when I'm looking through the comments, like, if I'm you, I would try to look for comments that first of all, they clearly are talking about justice somehow, and maybe they're talking about different types of justice, right? Like, one person's talking about distributive, one person's being like, the NFL should be punished, and so on. So anyway, that's what developing ideas from evidence means. And then the very last step, step 4, you're going to figure out sort of what your main argument is, and your thesis statement, okay, by writing paragraphs. So in this case, they're trying to get us to use the writing of a paragraph as a method, right, as a process for basically figuring out what our arguments are going to be. And for the discussion this week, you need to write 2 paragraphs of this essay. So what you want to try to do is basically come up with two ideas that have to do with these things, right? Like each paragraph should have some evidence from a fan, citizen, or commentator. So from the comment world, you're using some evidence, quoting something people said. Some sentences explaining what ideas of justice you found in their evidence, right? So after you interpret what the comments are, what type of justice they're talking about, and also, quoting from that type of justice, right? Like what distributive justice is. Here's the quote, and here's what the guy said in the comments, and here's the connection between the two. And then some sentences analyzing the implications or the consequences. So if I'm talking about distributive justice because Neil talked about distributive justice and we're talking about it as far as NFL goes, and I just develop thinking and I end up being like, yeah, I think the pay, even for concussions and stuff, is too much compared to other disciplines and other people who are more important in society. And so maybe we would need to do something to change it so payment reflects. And so now I have a whole topic I can deal with. One of the other things will be, hopefully, you'll be able to use parts of your last essay from essay number 3. Right, you'll be able to pull stuff from it, definitions of the. Depends on what you end up with for this essay, but you should be able to use some of that. So you want to write a couple paragraphs. That's what the discussion post A is all about. You're going to write 2 paragraphs. You want to make sure these 3 things are in them. And as you write them and you're discussing them, you start to figure out what position you may take. All right, so once you've written a bunch of these, then your argument right? So we're going to do 2. Discussion, interaction, prompt A. 2 body paragraphs of your paper, and each make sure you have all the elements of an academic paragraph. That usually is topic sentence and evidence, an explanation of evidence, and connection. So you should have at least 1 sentence in each paragraph that includes details from the justice definition and details from specific examples you found. You're also meant to read your classmates' posts and comment on 2 of them. This one is due by Wednesday, which is tomorrow night. I might change it to Thursday. I know I keep doing this. I know, and I'm sorry if it annoys people. It's just that week that we took, and it sort of hurt. So I'm trying to be fair and all that goodness. I'd rather have you post your 2 paragraphs by then. So the hope is that, they're going to be part of your essay, your rough draft, no matter what. Okay, and then the second one is you want to find evidence that you're planning to use for your essay. So this means finding other information or articles or sources. Okay. And what you're posting in the discussion are passages from 2 sources. So if you found 2 more articles, so if I end up talking about the concept of justice and athletic pay, right? Because that's where my mind went and that's what I started thinking about. And so I'm going to go out and find some articles about that to help me, right? I'm going to find some good articles that have, that are credible, that talk about athletes' pay, versus regular people's pay, and hopefully use that. So in this discussion post, you're pulling different, like a few sentences from one source, a few sentences from another source, and talk about how you plan to use them, how they might help you. How do you think they'll function? Like, what can you use them for? What concerns or questions you have about these sources? And that's sort of like, so you're trying to come up with a question like, what do you make yourself have a concern about it? It could be credibility, or it could be some idea that they bring up. And then you're looking at 2 classmates, their sources specifically, you're reading them and you're trying to identify what these have to do with justice. That one's due at the end of the week on Sunday. Okay, so that's it. That's the 4 steps for developing essay number 4. Please don't hesitate to send me a question. Ask me questions. I am here to help us push through and get to the end of the course. You guys are doing really well, and it's tricky because I don't talk to people, but I can sense people out there in the world. In any event, but you guys are really doing well. I can tell you're putting in effort, which is just that makes all the difference, especially in an online course. All right, I will talk to people later.